biggest shift in this white paper is that we will finally honour what take back control meant and begin to choose who comes here so that migration works for our national interest. You know, this is where the whole debate is skewed. As if some people think controlling immigration is reining in a sort of natural freedom, rather than the basic and reasonable responsibility of government to make choices that work for a nation's economy. And for years, this seems to have muddled our thinking. But let me be clear, it ends now. We will create a migration system that is controlled, selective, and fair.
Let's get reaction to that now. Let's go first to our Westminster newsroom and join my colleague Harry Farley. Harry, what sort of reaction has been coming in now since we've heard from Prime Minister Starmer setting out what his plans are?
Well, I suppose the first thing to draw out is that the Prime Minister promised to bring net migration down. He said those numbers will fall. He didn't say how much they will fall by or to what level he wants to see net migration. That's the number of people coming into the country compared to leaving. He didn't say at what level he thought was appropriate. He said, well, previous targets for net migration have failed. He didn't want to go down that path. But I think that's quite an interesting point to make, that he's not setting a target. It's very difficult to, I suppose, measure that against, because we know that if you look in the recent history, that net migration has been at record highs. So we know that migration is going to fall. We're expecting a new set of figures next week. We know already that those numbers will be down from this year compared to last year. So I suppose the question is, how much further does the Prime Minister think it should go? How much further does he think is the right level for net migration coming into the country? And at the moment, at least, avoiding putting a target on that figure. The other thing I would just draw out is he says that businesses who want to bring people in must invest in this country. I think when we get the details of this in about half an hour's time, it'll be interesting to see exactly how that will work.
Okay, Harry Farley in our Westminster newsroom, thank you very much. Well, now let's go to Downing Street and join our political editor, Chris Mason, who is inside that briefing from the Prime Minister. You also asked a question, of course, didn't you, Chris? What's your take on this? I mean, immigration is a hugely political issue at the moment, although the Prime Minister said none of this was about politics.
Yeah, and then proceeded to be very, very political in the argument that he was making, Ruchini, which is the want of political leaders, inevitably. The big picture context is this. In the UK, between the 60s and the 90s, net migration, the number arriving minus the number leaving, was pretty much flat, balanced, zero. From the mid-90s, it climbed, and has climbed at various points, even though politicians at various points have suggested it wouldn't go up by anywhere near as much as it turned out to be. So we saw that in the early 2000s with the expansion of the European Union. There was no so-called transitional controls put on by the government of Tony Blair, and far more people came here than the government expected. The Conservative and coalition governments of the 2010s promised to cut net migration to the tens of thousands. They never once managed that. Then there was Brexit, where the idea of taking back control was central, where lots of people who backed Brexit might have hoped for a fall in immigration. What happened? The opposite. It spiked to new highs in the immediate years after Brexit was delivered. So firstly, there's been this big social and demographic change in the 21st century around net migration, one of the most profound that the UK has witnessed. And then there's been political failure when you compare rhetoric with reality. And it's into that the Prime Minister stood in the last half hour with his promise that he can get the numbers down, and as he said to me, get them down significantly. He's not putting a number on it. Why? Well, previous governments tried that. It proved a massive hostage to fortune, so you can see why he hasn't. But the trend promise is clear. Now, we do know these figures are going to fall. There's some figures coming out in about 10 days' time, and they will fall. We know from the visas that have been granted in the last calendar year that number is going to fall. The question is, does it continue to fall in the coming years, so the Prime Minister can demonstrably point to evidence that his promise has been delivered, whilst at the same time managing the myriad of trade-offs around migration when it comes to the specifics of particular sectors like care homes, for instance, some in that sector fearing that they won't be able to staff care homes adequately without foreign workers, and then the interaction between migration and economic growth. There's been a sense from quite a few people for a number of years that if you boost immigration, you can boost economic growth. The Prime Minister's contention is that recent evidence suggests that that's not the case, and that if you can design a migration system that is sufficiently savvy, it can be economically savvy as well as, if you like, numerically savvy, if your political aim, as it is for this government, is to get those numbers down.
Okay, our political editor Chris Mason, thank you very much for sharing your early thoughts and analysis following that announcement from the Prime Minister. Well, there's more thoughts from Chris in a blog that's just been posted a couple of hours ago on the BBC News website. I should also say that we have a live page as well, which has up-to-date reaction and more analysis as well from BBC colleagues. Now, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has responded to Vladimir Putin's suggestion of talks in Istanbul, saying he's ready to meet Russia's president there in person. President Putin unexpectedly suggested that Russia-Ukraine talks should take place in the Turkish city this Thursday, but President Putin did not say that he'd attend in person himself. The Russian initiative sidelined a demand from European leaders for Moscow to commit to a 30-day unconditional ceasefire by Monday or face a new round of sanctions. Well, our security correspondent Frank Gardner sent us this report from Kyiv.
It was all going so well for Ukraine. To Kyiv they came, leaders of some of Europe's most important countries, with an ultimatum for Russia: sign up to a ceasefire or face new sanctions. But Vladimir Putin had other ideas. Instead of a ceasefire, direct talks, Russia and Ukraine, in Istanbul next Thursday. But would President Trump insist on that ceasefire? Apparently not. He took to social media. President Putin of Russia doesn't want to have a ceasefire agreement with Ukraine, he wrote, but rather wants to meet on Thursday in Turkey to negotiate a possible end to the bloodbath. Ukraine should agree to this immediately. I'm starting to doubt that Ukraine will make a deal with Putin. Have the meeting now. The last time Volodymyr Zelensky sat down with Vladimir Putin was in Paris 6 years ago. Yes, that's actually him on the left, a young man, before the strain of Russia's full-scale invasion. But now he's given this address, complying with Mr. Trump's wishes.
I will be in Turkey this Thursday, May 15th, and I will be waiting for Putin there, personally. And I hope that this time Putin will not look for reasons why he cannot do something. We are ready to talk to end the war. Thursday, Turkey. President Trump has given his support. All leaders support this.
Hot on the heels of his World War II victory parade in Moscow last Friday, a chance to air his grievances, his demands to demilitarize Ukraine, to deprive it of the means to defend itself. The chances of a real breakthrough in Istanbul on Thursday are slim.
Well, Frank joins me now.